Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you for having me today at JoomlaDay USA. I'm Parth Lawate from Tikri Technologies and Tech Joomla, and I'm going to be talking about Joomla, an alternative to SaaS. Hi, so let's look at the topic today, and before we do that, I'm just going to give you a quick introduction about myself. So I'm Parth Lawate. You can follow me on Twitter and email me at the email address that's given on the screen. I am the CEO and co-founder at Tech Joomla and Degree Technologies. In the Joomla community, I've been active for a long time. I'm a co-founder of the Joomla user group in Pune, and I'm also one of the organizers at JoomlaDay India. I've been working in Joomla since the Mambo days. It's been a long while, and our evolution has been really amazing, and we have really loved the journey to be growing with Joomla. The next slide gives you a quick idea of how we evolved over the years. So when we started out, I was part of a non-profit, and we were helping out with the website for that non-profit and a few other non-profits. And at that time, it was about creating static websites. And then we moved into a DIY mode where we were starting to build our own stuff. And this was back when we discovered the things like PHP Nuke and eventually Joomla. And when we saw Joomla for the first time, we were frankly blown away. If you remember the PHP Nuke times, installing a module was about editing probably 54 different files in 100 different places to get something working. When Mambo came to the scene, that's what Joomla was called back then. It was just about installing a zip file and bang, everything started working. It was amazing. And that's where we moved into our journey as a system integrator. I started my first company when I was still doing my engineering in the last year, and that's how this journey started for me. And over time, we moved from being system integrators to consulting and custom development. Eventually, starting Tech Joomla in 2009, where we started doing our own extensions and providing solutions to customers all over the world. And today, we are doing the whole kind of thing, everything you can do with Joomla, from being system integrators to consulting and doing custom developments, having our own extensions that are available at Tech Joomla. A lot of them are open source. I mean, all of them are open source. A lot of them are also free. We also do mobile apps. We are also doing a lot of enterprise work, as well as are heavily involved in cloud-based development. So it's been an amazing journey. A quick note about TakeD. This is the first company that I formed. Our vision and purpose is to be a catalyst for societal transformation by empowering organizations and individuals with technology. And this comes from the fact that we started this company when we were still running a nonprofit, and we wanted to ensure that we use technology to really have an impact. And we've been lucky to actually do a lot of work, which has allowed us to do this. Uh, this is just a quick snapshot of TakeD. We have delivered over 100 projects over the years. One of our biggest projects, in terms, at least from a Joomla perspective, is the Aadhaar website for the government of India. This is a Joomla-based website in over 13 languages. It receives a huge number of hits. It's probably the one of the highest traffic websites using Joomla, and if you look at how it is architected, it is a lot of innovative stuff using Joomla and custom fields. It doesn't have any custom extensions on it. And if you go and visit it at uidai.gov.in, you'll see that it actually ends up being able to do a lot without using any extension. So while we do our own extensions, we also know when not to use them. And the idea is to make sure that you're solving a problem. And whenever we can, we try to keep things really slim and stick to the core. And this is one of the great examples of how powerful Joomla can be. We have written over 690,000 lines of code over the years. We have a lot of free and paid extensions out there. The number you see here is all the plugins we have delivered over the years. Uh, as a company, we are offering web and application development. We do custom software solutions and digital transformation. We are also into big data and AI. And open source is one of the core things that we do at TechD. Joomla is really one of our big things there, but we have tried to mimic our Joomla story in other areas. We are also heavily involved in mean stack projects now, and we are trying to create a similar ecosystem in that space. This is just a quick idea of all the technologies that we do. I will give a lot of my, you know, uh, the reason behind a lot of our growth is the initial movement that we got because of having something like Joomla and establishing ourselves in that space, and we were able to really use that as a uh, point to launch our journey into new technologies. And now we are a full stack development firm doing everything from open source and Joomla and PHP to Python to Java and a lot of other technologies. So what you see on the screen is just the full stack of what we do. We have a global presence. We started out with our main office in Pune. We expanded to Bengaluru, where we have a development team. We have sales and marketing offices in the UK as well as in the US at two places. And a lot of you probably already know about Tech Joomla. We have a lot of leading Joomla extensions, from e-learning to donations to event management to e-commerce. And these are just a few. There is a lot of stuff on our GitHub, both at our TakeD GitHub and Tech Joomla GitHub. We have a lot of infrastructure extensions. We talk about this spirit of open source that we have in the company, where we are always creating new stuff that can be used by a lot of people. So uh, go visit our GitHub. You'll find a lot of great stuff there if you're working with Joomla that you can use in your own projects without having to pay anything. Then App Carvers is our division which focuses on mobile applications and modern web applications. This is where a lot of our mean stack work goes on. And interestingly, a lot of our products in this space are actually front ends for Joomla backends. So that's an interesting space to be in nowadays. So let's get to today's topic. Uh, can Joomla be an alternative to SaaS? And how does Joomla, help you kind of handle the threat that SaaS brings a lot of web development companies? So I would say it's not a threat, it's actually an opportunity. And it's a great way on which you can leverage your current skills and use something like Joomla to really launch yourself into this newly evolving market where SaaS is really growing like crazy. At the same time, there is a huge space for solutions built on an open source stack like Joomla, which can provide credible alternatives to SaaS and help counter some of the negatives that SaaS brings. So let's first understand what is this SaaS all about. And before we do that, we'll be doing some audience polls. You can use the polls system that is there. You will see this poll pop up. You can answer those questions. So the first question I have is that who are you? Are you a website developer or programmer that you develop complex web applications on your own, or you have your own company, or you're working with a company that does this? The next option is, are you an integrator where you use systems like WordPress, Joomla, or even Wix? It doesn't have to be open source, and you integrate ready stuff and build websites and deliver them to either internal customers or external customers. Or are you a hobbyist or a DIY person who is managing your own website, or just helping few people doing that, and this is not really your main profession, but this is something you do on the side? Or are you an end user who is actually using the software that is built, and that could be open source or SaaS? So I'm just doing this poll to understand what kind of an audience we have today, so that I can ensure that the session in the session I handle those kind of queries, and I can ensure that I'm catering to the entire audience. So the next question I have is, I hope you've answered that. The next question I have is, where do you work? So are you a freelancer? Are you a small web agency? Are you a larger web agency, depending on the size of people you work with? Or are you part of a non-software enterprise where you are building software or websites for your company? Or are you a small business and end user of software? Or are you a larger business who is an end user of software? So you can again answer that question on the polls that you can see on the right. Now the final question. So who are your primary customers? Now all these questions are very important when you will realize that once we go through the presentation. Uh, Here you'll see you have four options. So and you can choose multiple here. You can have individual or small business owners as your customers. You can have enterprise, which is large, maybe Fortune 500, or not necessarily that, but much larger businesses that are your customers. Government, not for profits. These are just a few options. I'm sure there are more types of customers, but I'm just trying to get an idea of who is attending today. Now that we have covered that, Let's look at this. Whatever you are building, finally we are building it for users or consumers. Now these consumers might be in a B2B scenario or a B2C scenario, that the consumer might be a business consumer at a you know client that is buying your software. It could be an internal consumer if you are building something for your own company, or it could be end consumers, like if you are building a B2C product, then end users will directly use it, right? And in a lot of cases you'll have combinations of this. So when you're creating something, let's say you have been contracted to build a e-commerce shop for a dry fruit manufacturer, then you will have business consumers using the backend of your applications, and you'll have end users of that business using your application. So remember that at the end of the day, it's all about these end users. And this SaaS story basically comes into play. And one of the key things that we need to understand is that what do these consumers want, and what can SaaS give them, and what can SaaS not give them? And that is a key question to ask here. So let's look at some of the benefits of SaaS. And believe me, we use a lot of SaaS products. We build SaaS products as well, and they do have a lot of benefits. And these are just some of them. So one of the big things when you are undertaking, and always look at this from your customer's perspective, that when a custom software development project is being undertaken, the upfront costs are pretty high. Even if it's a small size project, right? It needs a lot of discovery. There'll be a lot of time spent. There'll be a lot of money that needs to be spent, whether it's built in-house or it's built through a contractor or an agency. So SaaS basically lets you start with a very low upfront cost. A lot of times there is no setup fee involved, or a very low setup fee involved. Second thing is that for the purpose that they're built for, SaaS products are plug and play. They will let you just start without having to do much. Of course, more complex SaaS products will need a lot of configuration, but a lot of micro SaaS, simpler SaaS products will just let you start immediately. The big third benefit that SaaS brings is that you don't have to worry about hosting, you don't have to worry about uptime. Security and redundancy is built in. Of course, you have to trust the provider with it, but assuming the provider is the credible provider, they have a good infrastructure, then all of this is taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. Finally, they are also well supported. SaaS operators operate at scale. They will have a lot of customers. They will have help and support options built in, everything from live chat to really great documentation. The pricing is flexible. That's another very important thing. That again, this again comes back to the cost front, right? That when you are building a software, whether 5 people in your organization are going to use it, or whether it is 500, with a custom software solution, you end up having to spend that cost. With SaaS, if it fits you, then you can pay just for one user or 5 users, depending on what you need, and there is no long-term commitment. That's another big benefit. That if you don't like something, you can cancel in 2 months, or 3 months, or whatever that commitment might be. And the final benefit is that these are always evolving. So because they're operating at scale, because they're bringing the price down, SaaS typically looks at acquiring users very fast, which means that the software development cost is divided across many users. And this scale basically allows SaaS to evolve very fast as well. Of course, they have to be extremely ensuring that they're really building robust stuff. Their upgrades don't break stuff. Everything is auto upgrade, right? There is this big discussion always happening in the Joomla space and the WordPress space, that are auto upgrades good or bad? And depending on where you're coming from, they could be good or bad, right? But at the end of it, if you have a very robust process, uh, remember that for end users, auto upgrades are always great, because the next time they open the software, they suddenly realize that, hey, I've got 3 new things to use now. And that is amazing for an end user, right? And of course, it does mean that somebody has to take a lot of care in ensuring that those upgrades don't break anything, right? So if SaaS is so great, what is the problem? Why are we actually talking about Joomla being an alternative to SaaS? Uh, isn't SaaS then going to kind of eat up all these markets which are served by the likes of Drupal and Joomla and WordPress? So not everything is great, right? And while SaaS is really great for a lot of use cases, there are problems that do come with it, which you have to mitigate. Whether you adopt SaaS or you don't, you have to think about these problems. So what are these problems? So one of the big things is vendor lock-in. That if you subscribe to a Salesforce, for example, it is not easy to move away. I mean, you might be able to get the data out, but if you want to migrate to somebody else like ServiceNow, it's not going to be really simple to get that data out and modify it. I mean, there is a lot of work involved in moving away from a vendor. Always remember, and that you'll just get the data out. Your processes, all the the way you use the software is going to change. So the portability is pretty limited. While as a rule they will have data portability, it is not easy. It is a migration. It's like a Joomla 1.5 to 3.0 every time you want to migrate away from a SaaS vendor. It's, believe me, it's not simple. Of course, there is a lot of competition in the SaaS space. They do try to make it simple, but still things are really hard because it's two different pieces of software, right? Not everything works, and migrations are not simple. The next point is lack of flexibility. And just coming back to the vendor lock-in problem, the earlier advantage that we saw, that there is no long-term commitment, but that's in terms of money, right? But once you actually get your data in, and it's hard to move away once you have invested 3, 4, 5 months into building your processes around a SaaS software. Uh, while contractually there is no obligation, from a business continuity perspective, you are locked in and you will end up having to commit long term. So that is one big problem. The next problem is lack of flexibility. So at the end of it, SaaS software is one size for everyone, right? It does have a lot of configurations, a lot of customization. So we work heavily with Salesforce, Zoho, and the likes of these people. And there is a lot of flexibility that they have added. So this part they have tried to handle, but still it doesn't give you the flexibility that your own software will, or something like an open source piece will. So there will always be limitations there. And again, customizing SaaS is not cheap. Typically, the hourly rates for somebody in a Salesforce developer versus the hourly rate for somebody in WordPress or Joomla, it's going to be way, way, way lower. So even the costs of customizations, even if customization is possible, can be much, much higher. Then there is no control on the features. So if you wanted something that your business needs that the SaaS product is not offering right now, there is no way for you to handle that. You have to live with it. There might be add-ons, there might be something available in the ecosystem, but you might not. It might not be there, and they might not have the APIs and the workflows needed for your specific thing. So as I said, both of these things, lack of flexibility and no feature control, they are not I mean, they are, I will say they're half truths in the sense that some platforms have really done a great job in making sure that they try to get around this. But still, if you compare something where you own the source code, it's still limited. The next point is that costs inflate at scale. So if you started with some software with 5 users and suddenly you realize now you need 1500 users on it, your cost is going to increase. And though with SaaS, cost per user really go down as the users increase, at a very large scale, they can still be prohibiting. And that's the place where, SaaS can become very expensive. The next point is that there is limited data control. I mean, while again this has been mitigated pretty well, where you can choose which country your data is stored in, but still this is pretty limited. And finally, you don't get the source code. So if you do decide to move away, you have to start from scratch. If you wanted to build everything again, you have to start from scratch. If you want to move to another provider, you have to migrate data to them. So not having the data, I mean, not having the source code means that if you had just needed something very small, and if it was on an open source platform, you would have probably just hired somebody to write you a plugin which would have done it. But if that's not possible in the SaaS product, you will be left with you will be really left hanging. So that is why it's very important, as an end user, and when I'm talking about end user, I'm talking about the business users making these decisions, that for some things SaaS might be really great. For some things, a customized solution might work way better. And sometimes a hybrid approach might be chosen. That for some things where SaaS is great at, use SaaS, uh, build a custom product, and then integrate with SaaS for whatever requirements that SaaS fulfills. So all these three options are looked at in the market, and that is where I think all of us as a Joomla developer community can actually take advantage of this opportunity. So how can you grab this opportunity with Joomla? And Joomla, believe me, empowers you to do this. So you could offer a SaaS alternative as a distribution. You could build a Joomla based SaaS where you are using a Joomla distribution and operating as a service. Or you could integrate your solution with SaaS. So all these three options are available for you. So what do they mean? I mean, what is the difference? So one option is that and I've talked about distributions. A lot of people have been talking about distributions in the past. So Joomla on its own, I always say that Joomla is like clay, right? You can mold it any way you want. You can do whatever you want with it. It's like a starter kit. uh, you put some more things onto it, you write some custom code, you do some, style it your way, and then it can become anything from an e-commerce cart to a ERP system. I mean, we have built some really really amazing things with Joomla, from an ERP for farmers to something like a UIDAI website to an e-commerce cart to something as completely unexpected as a IoT application management platform. So it is really really powerful. So if you can find a niche which has a market share where people are looking for an option where they want to get around the limitations of SaaS, if you can package Joomla with the right recipe to counter the SaaS competition and offer it at a good price point, then a SaaS distribution. So it could be a distribution that you let people download and host it themselves, or you could say that I'll offer you a hosted service that then it's as good as SaaS for you. I will package auto upgrades for you. I will make sure that things work. Or you can say that, I mean, the third solution is really a combination when you're offering a SaaS alternative, or even if you're building completely bespoke stuff, that you integrate with SaaS. We regularly do this, right? So I'm sure a lot of you integrate with MailChimp for emailing. You don't take the trouble of handling mailing. It depends, right? Sometimes you will use a Joomla based mailing product. Sometimes you just want to hand it off. In a lot of cases, you will want to integrate with a Zoho CRM or a HubSpot or a Salesforce because they're really good at what they do, and then the rest of the stuff you end up handling. So there is a lot of space in this market where Joomla can really thrive. Joomla can empower a lot of kinds of solutions. So now let's look at how does this all work. I mean, how do we get started? And for that, we need to really understand the market. So the next slide that I have is extremely complex. I was hoping to convert this into an animation, but I haven't had the chance to do it. But I'm going to do my best to explain. So you remember the poll at the start, right? So as developers or as people who are using software, we fall somewhere in these areas. So we are either a hobbyist, we are a system integrator, or we are a small agency doing stuff for customers. Or we might be a pretty large agency which does proper hands-on software development, or it could be combinations. Some of us would also be end consumers. So now let's look at, from a business decision standpoint, what is it that people expect? What is it that these end consumers expect? And what is the perception of these end consumers about different products in the market? So if you look at a Facebook or a Wix, these are like ready cloud products, or a MailChimp for that matter, or a Salesforce for that matter. So here the perception of, and here I've looked at different parameters. So if you look at perceived market share, expectation of simplicity, level of expertise required, these are all perceptions, remember, and also truths, not necessarily perceptions. Flexibility, cost of acquisition, these are all the parameters on which I'm comparing the various solutions. All these buildings you see here are examples. So this comes from a different presentation I've done in the past about the Joomla ecosystem, but it's very relevant here. So if you look at it, a Facebook or a Wix or a MailChimp, the perception is that the cost of acquisition is very low because I just need to pay a X monthly fee or pay X dollars per user. That is it. Of course, that scales a lot if you have a lot of users, right? Versus if I wanted to build a system like that, then my cost of acquisition is going to keep going up depending on how I build it, right? So if I build it with something ready like a WordPress or Joomla, it will be a little higher. If I completely build it from scratch, it will be probably highest. In terms of flexibility, with these products, you have to play by their rules. The flexibility is limited. As you go to the left side of this, your flexibility will start increasing. Similarly, perceived market share. So here, basically, obviously, products that are ready for end users to use, which are basically ready, right? So if you have a MailChimp, its market share is going to be huge. Because it's ready, it's positioned in the market, it's being marketed as a specific solution for a specific problem. Whenever you're selling something like a Joomla or a WordPress or any kind of Drupal based or whatever that you're building here, it is about that you can kind of create curated solutions for problems, right? So your positioning is that you can probably do everything. But these people that are looking for stuff, they are getting ready SaaS products right here. They will only come to you if they realize that something's not working for them. The expectation of simplicity. So if you look at it, these solutions are expected to be super simple, while these expectation, these are expected to be extremely hard to use, so to say. Similarly, level of expertise from end users is that these products will require little or no expertise, but as you end up going from Facebook and Wix to Joomla to WordPress to Drupal and custom applications, the level of expertise developed required to build those things or use those things is more complex. So where will you play in this market? So you can play in both places. So if you can create a solution that can be offered as a service where people just come online, click, make a few clicks and get a ready-made Joomla website, which is completely powered up and does everything it needs to do. Maybe you also block a few things that they can do. Of course, they can break out if they want because Joomla is open source. But a lot of things is always remember that this flexibility that we give in our products also brings a lot of complexity. Because always remember that as flexibility increases, as your solution becomes more flexible, the simplicity keeps going down for the end user. So a lot of times when you're building something that is specific, you will see that you also remove a lot of functionality. So typically when we play in this field, we look at removing some features out of all the things that we build up here. And of course, it depends on the customer, right? What they need. And here you can actually play across the market depending on what you're doing. So if you're offering a SaaS alternative as a Joomla distribution, or you're integrating your solution to SaaS, you can play this entire market. And depending on what you're building, you can offer it cheap or it could be expensive depending on what you're offering. So uh, if you understand this cycle, if you see what is the market looking for and who you are in this market, you can figure out how Joomla can work for you. You can look at playing in multiple markets. You can look at playing in a single market as per your choice. So I've always looked at, and this is interesting. So one of my friends who is not in the open source space once asked me, "What is this Joomla about? What are these extensions all about?" And while explaining it to him, I realized that Joomla is like a distributed SaaS. You have all these extension developers who are building extensions which are really rich pieces of functionality, which are all out there floating in the market, free and paid extensions. You take a Joomla, you kind of combine all these pieces, and then you get something really functional, right? And all these extension developers are continuously improving their products. So you get that as upgrades. So yes, you have the responsibility of getting all everything together, but you are actually in the Joomla ecosystem getting a lot of the benefits of SaaS, of continuous evolution, of being able to get it at a pretty low cost, because even there the cost is being absorbed by multiple people. And believe me, as this ecosystem grows, as the end users grow, even Joomla extension prices will come down, because as developers are able to get to bigger markets, those prices will go down and you will be able to offer the overall net acquisition cost. And again, it doesn't have to be low, right? You might be playing in a market where you have to have a higher acquisition cost. Depending on where you're playing, you can make your choice of extensions. So if you're playing in the enterprise space, you probably need a few enterprise extensions that are expensive, which means your solution will be a little expensive, but then you're playing in a market that is okay to pay that price. And maybe you'll still end up being cheaper than most of your competitors. So that's market strategy, different topic. But understanding these markets will definitely help you a lot. And of course, here I've looked at it more from a perspective of who we are today in the market. If you do a similar analysis of your customers, then you will get a even interesting picture. So when I say the Joomla ecosystem is like a distributed SaaS, if you look at the Joomla core, and if you extend it with all the ecosystem partners, which is extension companies, hosting companies, cloud services like Watchful, or monitoring services, security services that are on the cloud, template companies, all of them together are giving you the building blocks of SaaS. Now somebody needs to come in and make these guys integrate them. So in effect, a Joomla based distribution is always evolving if you build it right, and you are not even having to do all the work. It is coming from upstream. It's coming from either the core of the product, it's coming from any of these services. But there are some problems. What are the problems here? So the problems are that you will have issues like all these pieces in the ecosystem, they don't really play well with each other. I think all of us know that, right? You will have extensions conflicting with each other, with the templates and whatnot. Auto upgrades are not easy because upgrades do break things. Nobody dares do an auto upgrade, right? Especially if you have a complex ecosystem of extensions. If it's core Joomla, it's probably safe to do. So I would say that's where you come in, right? You need to make sure that somebody comes in and make sure that all these guys play well together. And there is a safety layer for the end users who will make sure that all this fighting doesn't reach the end users. Somebody who is making sure that things are playing well with each other. They are, and even if they're not, there is probably a layer that you are investing in, which ensure that before it reaches our end consumers, it is really well gelled and playing well together. So that's kind of the story, that if you can align things, if you can find a market that needs a solution, then there is a lot of success here. Also remember that this kind of sales also works better because you are trying to solve a problem, and you're not selling a specific technology. So it doesn't matter whether it's built on WordPress or Joomla or Drupal. It's about you going out to the problem and saying that, here's a solution that can work for you. So this was how I see Joomla being an alternative to SaaS, or at least a partner to SaaS in some scenarios, and how you and I and the entire Joomla ecosystem can benefit from this. And I'm talking about this only after doing it for several years. So this is not a concept anymore. This is something that we have tried and it's working really well for us. So I'm just going to go through a few cases of where we have created a solution using this, and we are playing in multiple markets. So we have built a solution for associations, we have built a solution for learning, and we are have also built a solution for non-profits. So these are solutions that are already out there. These are not marketed as Joomla-based solutions. These are sold as problem, solutions to a specific problem. They're all powered by Joomla, and it's interesting, very interesting mix of technologies in all these solutions. Joomla is part of it, but we are using a lot of cloud services as well, like native Amazon services, things like Algolia, things like Cloudflare coming into the picture. So it's a mix that kind of ensures that all of these customers, we are maintaining these distributions, we are ensuring that the customers get completely robust solutions, and we are ensuring that all the fighting that we saw is getting solved before it reaches our customers, and that's a very interesting space to be in. So let's look at one case here, which I'm going to quickly show. So this is a solution that we have designed for the associations and federations of the world. We have a few customers in this space already. I'm going to showcase some of them. And this is something that is working well, and it's also great for revenues in the Joomla ecosystem, because we ensure that our pricing is done in such a way that any extensions that we use, they are paid for through these solutions when we sell it to the customers. Their costs are also taken care of in the AMCs that we sign with these customers. So for the end user, it is almost like a ready to go product that is completely supported. We ensure that anything that needs to be done is done, and end users are supported, and they get a really robust solution. So let's look at what I have. So what are the challenges faced by associations, federations? And some of them are membership management. All of these guys are driven by memberships in a big way, and even more by events. In the last year and a half, due to the pandemic, the events part of it has been very severely affected. And luckily, we were kind of already in the process of integrating a lot of live event systems with our ticketing system in TechJoomla. So we were able to take that and use that to solve this problem, which was like a really big problem for associations in the last year, and our customers have heavily benefited from it. The other piece of it is managing content and data. One part of it is the website, and the other part of it is actual data and metrics management. So we integrate a lot of interesting BI tools to help them understand their data with the Joomla database or any other reporting database that we might have on the backend. And then there is the bit about communication and engagement, that associations typically have to make sure their members are engaged. They are really they are getting a value out of their membership. So these are just few key challenges. Of course, each association has its own niche challenge, and we have also built a lot of niche specific solutions for them. So this is Takedy's Joomla-based framework for associations. This is what we do. I'm not going to read all of this, but as I said, these are the four key areas: being able to understand members, engage members, uh, handle their interests, be able to send them targeted data, handle content management, handle things like tenders and industry reports, and other value that uh, associations provide, like publishing magazines, publishing e-learning, having communities to manage the member interaction, managing events, uh, handling the renewals. That's another big pain area for associations. So we completely automate that process. And these are just a few slides which detail it out. So we typically bundle this with a website because typically associations also have very bad looking websites. So we try to ensure that we are not just giving them a backend, but we're also giving them something that is modern, that is really customized to their requirement. It is cross device compatible. We do a lot of detailed deep dive with them on systems thinking and information architecture, and ensure that they get an experience that's really good for them to attract more members. And this same portal also serves as their way to deliver value to end members, right? So there is a lot of thought that goes into this process. So this is something that is done very curated for each association. So this is our custom piece that goes with it. The next piece is these are the building blocks that are common across associations. So there's membership management, which will handle different types of membership, accept fees online, handle automated payment reminders and online payments. We typically integrate with our UCM system, TJUCM, which is open source CCK, to generate a automated member directory. Depending on whether they're paid or free member, we decide what benefits they get. We give them a dashboard to manage their own members. Then there is also team access is something else that we do, which allows associations to get access to their team, give the team members access to the website as well. Then we have event management built in, which is basically J-ticketing. It integrates with Zoom and Jitsi, collects attendee information, manages online payments. Even offline was a big piece of the product actually, but in the last 1.5 years we're not used it. But it lets you do ticket scanning using an app. It lets you do sponsor booth data collection and whatnot. Then under the engagement of communication, we typically build in a social platform like Easy Social, where you have member profiles and data sharing, typical member directories. We will also plug in something like ACY mailing to manage the newsletters. If the client prefers, we integrate with Zoho or Salesforce or something like MailChimp as well. So this is the Joomla Stack for associations. So J-ticketing for online events, reporting is handled by TJ Reports and a connector for Google Data Studio that we have for ad hoc reporting. Pay plans manages the memberships and renewals. Easy Social and ACY mailing take care of the engagement, and team access and a bunch of other stuff is handled through a lot of our custom extensions that we build for these customers. So that's kind of the story. These are some of our association customers. I will try to show you a demo as well of some of these. So now we can stop for questions. Thank you so much. Looking forward to your questions.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us. Does
Thank you.
anyone have questions for Parth? Are you doing the nonprofit management for existing? Sorry, let me start again. Are you doing all the nonprofit management with existing extensions?
Most of it, yes. Some we are building on top. So we have JGive, for example, which is a donation and crowdfunding system that we use as a base, and then we build stuff around it. And most of the things that are things that we can open source, and the thing that, in the case that we see that a nonprofit needs something that's actually useful for everyone else, that will also go into the product. So it kind of keeps evolving that way. So yeah, it is all based off JGive, which has sort of a small donor CRM built in into it, which other than crowdfunding, it also takes care of a lot of donor interaction and communications and things like that.
Any other questions? You can either. So John would like you to talk about your donation solution extension and have you used it for nonprofits? And can you talk about security?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the extension is called JGive. You can find it on the Tech Joomla website. It was created as a extension to drive crowd-based donations or crowd-based innovations. So basically, to create marketplaces like Go Indigo and basically help websites or charity websites. It is a multi-vendor system, which means that you can use it as a complete platform, which is multi So basically, multiple people can come in and put their causes in, and then use that to raise funds. But then it also has a very key piece for a single nonprofit. So instead of using it as a marketplace, if you want to use it for a specific nonprofit, then it your entire donor database into it, which will manage organizational donors as well as individual donors. And then it will also let you have a back office area, manage donations that are not happening online. And obviously, if they're happening online, they will be handled through the extension. In terms of security, John, there are two aspects of security. So one aspect is the application security. So this is a native Joomla extension. It uses all the core Joomla ACL. So you can create different roles depending on what kind of access you want to grant it. The other point of it, when you, and here we are talking about SaaS versus creating your own, right? So when you host your own thing, you need to make sure of the web infrastructure that you're using. So let's say you're using something like AWS to host the application. You need to make sure that it's set up correctly and it's secure. But the application itself would be secure. The extension itself is tested heavily from a security perspective as well. And then you need to make sure that you're also taking care of what else is going to into your Joomla website besides the extension, because typically security is a function of how much surface area that you expose. So by itself, Joomla itself is tested very heavily as well. But depending on how many extensions you have, I would definitely recommend running some penetration tests on any application of this sort that you have, so that you can be safe from a security perspective.
That was a
Yeah,
great answer.
yeah, I guess Anne has the same question. I hope that's answered as well. So yes,
Yeah.
it is mostly with existing extensions. Absolutely.
So, can you talk a little bit more about penetration tests?
Absolutely, absolutely. So typically in security, there is you do security testing on multiple levels. So when you have a web application, you can either look at engaging a agency that is doing VAPT, which is vulnerability assessment penetration testing, and it has basically there is something called as OWASP guidelines that are followed to test an application. Do a series of tests, some of them manual and some of them through automated tools. If you just Google that, I will put it on the chat as well. It is OWASP, OWASP, OWASP guidelines for testing. If you just Google that, you'll be able to find some tools that can do it, but you should always not rely just on tools, because a manual tester will be able to find that is correct, John. That is OWASP. You'll be able to, I mean, a manual tester will be able to find much more than an automated tool. JGive by itself does not handle membership directories, but it does handle the donor directory that you would need. If it needs to be published as a member directory, I would integrate it with something like Easy Social, or build it using Joomla Fields itself, depending on what you need. So typically for associations, we don't use JGive, because if it's a membership scenario, then what we do is that for memberships, typically JGive doesn't go into the mix for associations. There we would handle pay plans, we will use pay plans, and we will either plug it with something like Easy Social, where each member will get a, if it's an individual member, they would get a profile, which would make it an individual member directory. Or if it's a community of, it's an association of institutions, then they would sign up as an organization, and then they would get a page in Easy Social. If a customer doesn't have a lot of the social requirements, then what we do is that these directories we basically build using either Joomla fields, or we use open source extension we have called TJUCM, which you can find on our GitHub. So that is how that combination would go. Yes. So JGive does integrate with Easy Social, but that's a very different kind of a scenario, right? So typically in a non-profit. Uh, so is this question from a non-profit perspective? So John, do you want to come on the stage? Bring you on the video stage so you can answer your question, ask your question uh, more in detail. Should I, SD, can we do that? Can we bring John to the stage? I guess you will need to request, right? John, you should see a button on the top right where it says request to share video or something like that, where you see the recording and the number of users and stuff like that.
Upper right hand corner.
Yeah.
of the black box?
So while you do that, since we're short on time, I will try to answer the question. So non-profits and associations typically have very cases of how directories would work. In an association, typically, if it's an individual users association, like a Rotary Club, for example, then the need would be for them to have individual profile pages. John is on the screen.
Okay.
Hey, hi, John.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi.
Okay. Hello. Yeah, I was really curious about the JGive integration with Easy Social. And if we explain a use case where you're running a site that has multiple charities on there or organizations, nonprofits, and you want to allow each of them to have fundraising capabilities, right? To collect money from their supporters, to allow donations, one-time donations, recurring donations. Is that possible with JGive? Is that currently possible? Is there a potential for that? Maybe talk a little bit more about it.
For the case you talked about, where you want multiple charities to get on there and put up their causes and raise funds using one-time and recurring donations, that is supported out of the box in JGive. You won't even need Easy Social for that. So that itself you can do out of the box.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That was really my question. It sounds like a pretty basic answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, John.
I'll ask you one more part if you don't have anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I think you answered this already also. But the JGive extension, does it integrate well with the major payment gateways and payment processors?
Yes, we do integrate quite a few extra payment gateways. So out of the box, we in the subscription itself, we support 5 gateways, which are pretty popular, like PayPal and CC Avenue and 2Checkout. We also integrate Stripe through a third-party integration. But all our extensions are called as a common payment safe released a while back. And there are some 30 odd integrations with it available, 30 to 40 integrations on our GitHub. We don't maintain them regularly, but a lot of them do work. But if you use something standard like a PayPal or a Stripe or a 2Checkout or a authorize.net, that's supported as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, John.
Alrighty, 3 minutes left. Any final comments or questions here? All right. Well, thanks again, Parth, for your participation in our very first immersive virtual JoomlaDay USA event. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your weekend to come and take part in this event. Please be sure to check out the sponsors who have donated time, money, effort, tech, and their expertise to helping us put this event on today. And there are some specials I hear in some of the booths, so you might want to peruse those. Also, go out to our networking area and get to know some of the other Joomlers who are participating today. If you if this is your last event, I'm glad that we had you, but please stick around. There's more this morning and then other events this afternoon. And you guys have a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, SD.
Thank you, guys.